A dream? It was all a dream. The words didn't seem right, didn't seem true. Quinn stood on shaky legs, scanning her apartment. It was just as she'd left it. She groaned, burying her face in her hands. No, no, no! She glanced down at the coffee table she was previously sleeping on, catching sight of her Bible and her favorite book. A book. She lunged for it and flipped through the pages, expecting to find an answer of some kind, but nothing but words greeted her. Frantically, she glanced up, keeping the book open. God, I want to go back. Take me back, please. Please. The lack of an answer made her heart plummet. Legs giving out, she sank onto her carpeted floor. Hot tears poured down her face, wetting the carpet beneath her. Quinn sobbed her frustration at what could have been. A life in which she could have been happy, but the truth was plain. Sognimia wasn't real, and neither were the citizens therein. None of it was real, even if it had felt real. As the hours dragged by, Quinn wept and tried to reason why she'd been pulled from the life she wanted into the one she dreaded. That evening, as the sun set, she forced herself to accept reality. She had missed a day of school, but work didn't start until Wednesday, so she had time to prepare for the faces she hadn't expected to see again. 2 days later, Quinn's alarm sounded. She didn't miss that noise, but she pushed herself to get ready and face the day with mechanical determination. Her feelings were irrelevant. She slipped back into the routine she knew. School consisted of a droning few lectures before Quinn was able to go home and study for an hour. Then, she had to get ready for work. Even though Quinn had been gone for months, everything was seared into her mind. She clocked into work, donned her apron, and served her assigned tables. Quinn allowed her mind to take her away as she ran through the rehearsed steps of working. Pain fueled her to get the day over with, so she could go home and wallow in self-pity. Engrossed in the anticipation of doing just that, Quinn mindlessly headed toward the kitchen. Not noticing the kitchen doors swinging open as someone exited, she crashed into them, sending their professionally balanced cups clattering to the ground. The liquids of soda, tea, and water splashed into a mixture at their feet, some splattering high enough to reach Quinn's apron, and worse, cause her to lose her balance. Gasping, she reached out for anything to prevent her from falling, but was met with thin air. At the last moment, strong arms reached out and took hold of her. One wrapped around her waist, and the other kept a firm hold on her upper back. More relieved at not falling into the awaiting puddle of doom beneath her, Quinn ignored the proximity of her hero and thanked them for their help. However, as she focused on their face, another gasp left her. Her heart thumped erratically, and her eyes widened as she stared into his eyes. Although there was confusion etched into his features, Quinn caught the faintest hint of admiration embedded in the depths of his gaze, a gaze she concluded she'd never see again. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to fall. Still holding her tight, her co-worker, Chris, looked on with concern. "Quinn? Are you okay?" Even his voice sounded similar. Quinn took a selfish moment to observe the man before her, despite knowing the truth. Her decision proved to be foolish, since in the next moment she burst into uncontrollable tears. The man startled, panic alighting his features. He released her, and she took the opportunity to run into the employee bathroom and lock the door. Tears burning her cheeks, Quinn's mind couldn't wrap around what she'd just seen. The weekend gratefully came, allowing Quinn to assess her week. While the rest of the week continued somewhat smoothly, Quinn couldn't erase what had happened on Wednesday. Still struggling to comprehend it, Quinn rested her head on her kitchen counter. As much as she wished it weren't true, her eyes hadn't deceived her. Her co-worker looked just like Christopher Wenslet. The facial structure and features, the curly, dirty blonde hair, the height, and most unnervingly, the same breathtaking green eyes. The only thing missing was the scar. A desperate part of her wanted to believe that it was him. She worked with him for the remainder of the week after the incident, but she'd done everything to avoid him. Admittedly, he wasn't the only problem she was avoiding. She still had to deal with her parents and Beck. While one problem presented itself as an easier feat, It would hurt regardless. But Quinn had already made her decision. A decision she'd been praying on and believed she received her well-awaited answer. She approached the apartment door, knowing it would be her last time doing so. Inhaling a breath of preparation, Quinn lifted her hand to knock, but the door flew open. She was met by Beck and a group of his friends engaging in boisterous conversation. Their deep laughs halted when they noticed her. When she offered a gentle smile to the group, everyone but Beck returned it. He didn't bother hiding his irritation at her unannounced appearance. "Quinn, what are you doing here?" She took the slap in the face without faltering. She kept her tone placid as she said, "Hi, Beck. Can we talk?" He must have sensed her graveness, since without another glance her way, he told his friends he'd catch up with them and walked back into his apartment. Quinn followed and stood in his living room after closing the door behind them. Beck eyed her cautiously, his beefy form rigid. He swallowed deeply before gesturing to his leather sofa. "Why don't you sit? I can get you some." "That won't be necessary, thank you." Before he could try to divert her attention, Quinn continued, "Beck, you were a great boyfriend in the beginning. Kind, caring, smart, compassionate." She shot him a pointed look with the last word. "But we both know things have changed greatly since then. Our lives are too different. I have to prepare for my future, and while I gave you a lot of the time I had left in my day, it didn't seem like enough for you. Nothing did." The man proceeded to stare at her blankly, his blue eyes processing her words. Running a hand through his sandy blonde hair, he asked the question of the century. "Are you breaking up with me?" Readying herself, Quinn nodded. "I am." She couldn't bring herself to apologize. This day would have come sooner or later. She was glad it came sooner. Several expressions passed his face. Confusion, realization, a hint of hurt, anger, and then his mask was back on. His body grew more tense as he looked away from her face, his stare fixed on the floor beneath them. Without lifting his eyes, he said, "You should leave." She only nodded and left without a word. Walking out of the building and getting into her car, Quinn drove off. A few tears left her eyes, but it was more from relief than actual pain. She'd finally done it. The next day, Quinn pondered how she'd get her things out of her parents' house. They hadn't been the most willing to help her out and still weren't. But she'd find a way. God would make a way. So, with a faith-filled prayer, Quinn went to her parents' house. She recalled them being back by now, but perhaps they wouldn't let her in. Pushing the doubt aside, she focused on praying until she arrived. Once there, she rang the doorbell and knocked. She would have let herself in, but her parents took the house key from her and hid the spare in a new place. The pain of their evident disdain grew fainter with each passing day. The question of why they treated her so wrong would ebb and pull like a wave crashing into the shore, leaving behind the foam of resentment. But she refused to let that stop her. She knocked firmly on the door, sealing her fate. There was a muffled conversation before the door swung open. The sight of her parents brought more dread than happiness, and the reason was clear. Both parents stared as if she were an unwanted guest, which she definitely was, before gaining common sense and letting her in. Quinn didn't bother scanning the mini mansion of her childhood, not caring less to see the entitlement and luxury she came from. She climbed the stairs until she reached her drabby room at the end of the hallway, the room furthest from her parents. Opening the door, she was met with old yellow painted walls with large orange cartoon flowers pattering the chipping canvas. Quinn wasn't too surprised they hadn't touched her room aside from putting some storage things in there along with her stuff. She simply gathered her boxes, making trips from the upstairs room to her car several times. When the room was nearly stripped of all her belongings, with one box left, that's when Quinn noticed something in the corner of the room, her jewelry box. Confused, she approached it, concluding she wasn't hallucinating. The box was still here, untouched. She didn't have to ask since her parents had somehow emerged from thin air. "We couldn't sell it." Quinn glanced at her parents as if their heads had just exploded. "Why'd you change your mind?" "It was more of a change of heart," her mom corrected with a shy shrug. an odd gesture coming from a woman of such coolness. "Your father and I have been thinking a lot lately, Quinn, and we haven't been the most fair to you. Could you ever forgive us?" Quinn blinked hard at them, more at the sincerity shining in their expressions. Maybe she was in yet another dream. But if this were a dream, she didn't want to wake up. Pushing down an unwanted lump, she could only nod. Her parents shocked her further when they pulled her into a hug for the first time in years. "We were thinking," her dad started, once they pulled apart. "How would you like a change in your living environment?" Eyes bulging, Quinn shook her head. "Dad, I couldn't. This place is way too—" "Not here," he chuckled. "But a friend of mine is hoping to rent out his apartment. It's an upgrade that isn't too demanding in price. It can fit more than all of your things, and it's close to your school and job." The offer sounded too good to be true, but Quinn knew it was yet another answered prayer. She took down the guy's information and promised to see her parents again before they moved away. When Quinn got home, she broke out into a praise. She leaped for joy and thanked God for the turnaround of her life. When her giddy excitement wore off, a certain sadness formed in the pit of her stomach. Life wasn't as terrible, but she missed the man in her dreams, fearing the truth that she would never meet such a man again. A couple of months later, Quinn was moved into her new apartment. Not only did the price of it allow her more financial freedom, but the location was all too convenient, saving her time and gas. Before her parents moved away, they threw her a housewarming party, and she received an abundance of new appliances and furniture that she couldn't have afforded otherwise. They promised to invite her to their home in New Mexico when her semester ended and show her around. From the sounds of their voices, Quinn could tell they were content with their choice. As for work, Quinn was able to get a paid internship that would help her towards her career, leaving her to quit her old job as a waitress. She didn't give much notice to her fellow employees to avoid the complaints she knew would come. But a certain guilt filled her when she noticed the solemn atmosphere in the last week she worked. As for her co-worker, they'd clearly gotten past the incident, but Quinn's heart still lurched at the sight of him. It was for the best that she was leaving. She prayed to never see him again. Thanks to the convenient location of her new home, the grocery store was within walking distance. Although winter was upon them, Quinn appreciated the chilly walk, given that she always bundled up, and her list was rather short. She grabbed a basket and focused on her handwritten list. The first item on the list was tomatoes. She headed over to the produce section of the store and began sorting through the various options of tomatoes. Too many options in her opinion. She wasn't sure which ones to choose. "I would personally recommend these," the voice interrupted her thoughts. Tensing, Quinn glanced up and was met with dazzling green eyes. She couldn't bring herself to look away from her ex-co-worker, Chris Gray, but he didn't seem to mind. He smiled, revealing a row of straight, pearly white teeth. "Hi, Quinn," he greeted her with his smooth, deep voice. She didn't recall his voice sounding so alluring before this. Trying to regain her composure, she offered a weak smile. "Hey, Chris." Turning his attention to the overwhelming rows of tomatoes, Chris picked out a cluster and placed it in her basket. Quinn went to thank him, but the words caught in her throat when he looked up at her. She found herself growing lost in the depth of his gaze. It seemed to communicate many things, but not that he'd known her once before in a mystical kingdom called Sognimia. Snapping out of her delusion, she quickly thanked him and turned to leave. He stopped her. "I was thinking we could exchange numbers and keep in contact, since you're not working at the restaurant anymore, that is." He seemed to add the last part last minute, perhaps to win her over. Quinn found herself agreeing, if only to have a new friend. Chris tagged along in Quinn's grocery shopping adventure and even offered to take her the short distance home. She found herself growing close with him a little too quickly, which threatened to be trouble in some way, shape, or form. Chris walked her up the stairs to her shared porch, carrying her singular bag. As he handed it over, preparing to wish her a good rest of her day, Quinn noticed something odd. "Where did you get that?" Her eyes hyper-focused on the faint white scar traveling from his temple to his jaw. How hadn't she seen it before? Against better judgment, she reached up to run her finger over it. Light stubble tickled the tip of her finger as she felt the cold skin. The scar was real. Realizing how rude she must seem, she retracted her hand and took a step back. Chris's eyes glinted with something too quick for Quinn to catch, but he answered her regardless. "My cat scratched me when I was 9. It seemed simple enough. Part of her expected him to say he got it in an epic battle with an evil baron, but the chances of that being possible were 0 to none. Not wanting to scare him off, Quinn wished him a good day. As he did the same, she didn't miss the playful look in his eyes. She blamed her flushed cheeks on the cold weather. Many months passed, and despite her evasive efforts, Chris had earned her heart. Through his continuous efforts to spend time with her, his evident love for God, and his easygoing personality, it was only a matter of time before Quinn fell for him. In doing so, the idea of the man she thought he'd be flew out of an open window, leaving her to get to know someone completely different. And she much preferred the man he was. Christopher Wenslet was fading from her memory with each passing day, and Quinn hardly realized it. One day, as she watered her window plant in the late afternoon, the warmth of spring sunlight coating her face, there was a knock on her apartment door. Expecting it to be Chris, who was supposed to be picking her up for their date, she didn't expect to find a mailman at her door instead. "Can I help you?" she skeptically asked. Just then, she noticed a package in his hands. "Are you Quinn Miller?" The older man smiled at her. She smiled back. "I am. Is that package for me?" The man nodded and told her to sign for confirmation and left after wishing her a good day. Quinn slowly closed the door behind her, confused as to why she had a package when she didn't order anything. She concluded it was from her parents and opened it. She expected a few things, but a book wasn't one of them. She faltered at the title. Quinn rubbed her eyes once and then twice before blinking, but the sight didn't disappear. Turning the book over, she hastened to read the description. A year after the marriage of King Henry and Queen Sabrina, the decision to keep Sognimia open for all is finalized. But what if it only furthers their trouble? While the assassination attempts have greatly lessened, tensions from other lands threaten to tear the kingdom apart. Captain Wenslet's suspicion and doubt of King Henry's choice doesn't cease, and is further fed when a mysterious woman is discovered in the king's garden, claiming she doesn't remember how she got there. Quinlan suffers from short-term memory loss, but one thing she can never forget is the man from her dreams. The man who happens to be Captain Wenslet. Desperate to find out more about the stubborn captain doesn't come easy, but Quinlan isn't one to give up. The two are forced to work together per the king's request, and while they quarrel more than not, there seems to be a deeper side to the captain that only Quinlan understands. Leaning on faith, Quinlan might not only be able to find out where she came from, but also figure out the grumpy man she believes she was destined to meet. Quinn's eyes bulged out of her head as she read the description over and over again. Past the incessant pounding of her heart, she tried to convince herself this was a sick joke, but the glossy book cover and inked words on the many pages spoke otherwise. To top it off, her favorite author's name was plastered on the cover as well. The opening of her door ripped her from her dilemma. Chris entered her apartment and closed the door behind himself. When he spotted her, his expression brightened, but then fell just as quickly. "What's wrong?" Knowing she couldn't lie to him, she opted for a watered-down truth. "I just received a book in the mail, and I didn't order it." Chris frowned, moving to stand beside her. "Well, is it a book you like?" "It's from my favorite author, actually," she admitted, half-heartedly. Unaware of her solemn mood, Chris's breathtaking smile returned. "That's great," before she could try to explain why it wasn't. He took her free hand in his, forcing her to look into his eyes. The love radiating from that singular stare was enough for Quinn to forget all about the odd book and focus on the man she loved. As they left her apartment to go on their date, Quinn concluded that whatever she'd find in that book wouldn't be enough to sway her. After all, God had blessed her with everything she'd wanted and so much more, and he did it in his perfect way,